Welcome to today's Career Month webinar, Working Internationally, with our alumni panelists, Tim Zhang, Sarah Lempa, Alan Slavic, and Bilal Karim. My name is Audra Farrell, and I'm the Director of International Alumni and the Travel Program at the University of Minnesota Alumni Association. Before we get started with the presentation, I would like to thank our Alumni Association members and donors for making initiatives like the Alumni Webinar Series possible. If you are interested in learning more about the Alumni Association, visit us at umnalumni.org/membership. Today's webinar is one of the many events we have planned for Career Month. On screen, you can see other upcoming events that are available to sign up for now at umnalumni.org/careermonth. Career Month is made possible by many great partners that are shown on your screen. Our presenting sponsor, Freedom Financial, is proud to sponsor Career Month because quality education and career development align with their mission to help everyday people move forward toward a better financial future. Their suite of financial solutions has helped hundreds of thousands of consumers take control of their finances, reduce their debt, and get on a path to financial freedom since 2002. The UMAA greatly appreciates all our partners who have made the events this month possible. I would also like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. Here are instructions for listening via phone. Participants are welcome to ask questions using the Q&A button, and we will do our best to address all questions submitted during our time together. And next, I'd like to invite my colleague Jane Sitter of UMN Career Services Administration to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jane, and I work at University of Minnesota Career Services Administration. I'm excited to get to know our panelists and glad that you decided to join us today. I will be monitoring your questions that you submit so we can discuss those at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Now I'd like to invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves. And I'd also like to say thank you for joining us and sharing your experiences of working outside of your home countries. We are so fortunate today to have 4 great alumni panelists with us. 2 attended the University of Minnesota as international students and are now living and working outside of the US and also outside of their home countries. And 2 are US citizens who are working and living outside of the United States. First of all, we have Tim Zhang, who is the founder at Overseasy and is joining us from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Tim.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Greetings from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. My name is Tim Zhang. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a proud UFM alum, graduate in 2016 with my Bachelor of Arts in Communication Study at the College of Liberal Arts and Bachelor of Science in Human Resources Development at the College of Education and Human Development. I was born and raised in China, lived in the US for 10 years, in Alabama, Minnesota, and New York. So my experience taught me I have the first hand that feel the supporting and the resources for working abroad are very limited. That's why I decided to build my own startups company here in Netherlands to help support individuals on their expat journey. I'm also a former employee of the U of M under the Division of Student Affairs. I'm so glad today I had the opportunity to join this panel to reconnect with my former colleagues here and to share my experience of working abroad with fellow Gophers.
Thank you, Tim. And we have Sarah Lempa, who's a freelance writer and creative media strategist, and she's joining us from Bali, Indonesia.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. It's great to be a part of this, and greetings, whatever time of the day it is by you. as was stated, my name is Sarah. I'm currently in Bali. I graduated back in 2018 from the Carlson School of Management with a marketing degree. So since then, I have actually started my own business online as a freelancer. I'm a writer and a media strategist. So I work with brands mostly in the travel industry, but not completely limited to that. Helping them build an online presence, whether that's in social media, digital marketing, email, anything like that. And yeah, honestly, back when I was in college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't know what form it would take. It's been a crazy journey, and I always knew that I wanted to travel. So since that was my priority, I knew that I would find a way to meld my career with it and move forward in a direction that I was passionate about. So I'm really excited to be connected again with the Alumni Association so that I can share my experiences, because I know I'm not the only one that felt clueless in college. So I'm really, really excited to kind of reconnect and talk about what I've gone through and how I've gotten where I am today.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. We look forward to hearing more. And next, joining us from Barcelona, Spain, we have Alan Slavic, who's the Chief Operating Officer at GRASP.
Thanks so much. Hello to everybody, wherever you are in the world. It's a pleasure to be here today. And I'll give a bit of a background to my story. I graduated from the University of Minnesota in 1997 from the Carlson School of Management with an undergraduate degree and a focus in international business and Spanish. And that really threw my career into an international space where I was able to study abroad, and I really fell in love with travel and learning new languages. And through that, I've been living almost the better part of the last 20 years abroad, 12 years or so, or 13 years in Paris. And most recently, just out of Barcelona, where we've moved with my wife and kids here about 2 years ago to start a new chapter in our life in a new place, which is pretty cool. I have to say the weather has a lot to do with our choice to move here. It's pretty beautiful, but I'll talk a little bit more about that today, what my motivations were. And currently, I'm Chief Operating Officer at GRASP. We are a mentoring platform headquartered in London, and our focus is really to help people to connect, learn, and to grow together. And I can talk a little bit more about that later as well if we get a chance. So thanks again for having me.
Thanks for being with us. And next we have Bilal Kareem, who is a data analyst at Glue Mobile and is joining from Toronto, Canada.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I went to the U of M from 2009 to 2014. I graduated from the Carlson School with a major in MIS, and something that I kind of really worked with or really enjoyed doing while I was there was actually just extracurriculars around leadership, and I enjoyed my classes in MIS. So I wanted to kind of figure out how to work in the space of data because there was A, blowing up at that time, and B, I had an amazing professor who actually showed me the ropes really well. I think through that, I worked in the States for about 4 years before I moved to Canada. And so I was able to translate a lot of that work, that things I learned over there to my roles over here. And having worked remotely since 2019, I could probably talk more about how remote roles in the US translate over to overseas. And I look forward to chatting with you guys.
Great, thank you, Bilal. All right, now we're going to move into the part of our time today where we ask our panelists questions. And again, we will try to get to all of the audience questions before the end of our time together. So feel free to use the Q&A if you're just joining us to submit your questions to our panelists. Okay. So our first question is, what drove you to pursue your current role and location? And how did your experiences at the University of Minnesota prepare you? So I'll ask Tim to start us off.
Sure, absolutely. I think with my journey moved to the Netherlands, it's part of like immigration I experienced in the US. I'm not a US citizen, so as an international student to stay in the US with H-1B visa is very limited opportunity in the past, like let's say 4 or 5 years. And I always want to try a new opportunity or change my career. That's the reason I moved to the Netherlands. And the reason I picked my current location because the government regulation in the Netherlands, they are consistently try to recruit highly skilled set worker from overseas. Then I'm qualified for one of their special resident permit. That's how I landed in the Netherlands. And I think my U of M experience definitely encouraged me to make this move, to explore some things unknown. I think I want to really code something I learned from my leadership minor class. Really like encourage me to think out of the box and follow my joy to try this kind of something under the uncertainty. The other things I think with U of M really prepare me for this move is through the student development outcome during my career with U of M as a student. So really helped me understanding independence and interdependence, how to work with other people. And with my role currently, I'm an entrepreneur, try to start something new. I think a lot of things with U of M, I learned how to do career network with other people, with the help through a career center like a Jane's office. So I have been consistently working with other alumni in the region, try to do more network and collaboration. So definitely, you know, I think you just need to really make that first step, then everyone can move.
Yeah, I would like to jump in on that one as well, because that last piece was so important. I was connected with the career services at Carlson and with Jane at the UMN level as well, on a semi-regular basis. While I was there, I think we had a few events, and being a part of that circle was really helpful in helping me move, and B, kind of getting situated, because some of the skills we learned in those events and kind of reinforced, they apply everywhere. For me, the story was a little different because I always enjoyed working with technology growing up, but having been involved in leadership positions in my high school and in college, I was also interested in figuring out how economic value kind of worked. And once when I got to the U, I figured out that there was a major that where I could have the best of both worlds. I declared my major immediately because that's exactly what I wanted. And in that major, we dove really deep into strategic technology management, systems analysis and design, and data analysis. And I think that professor was really helpful. I think Gatus, he was really good at showing how companies were actually using these technologies, using these things to maybe create new industries and transform their existing industries as well. And once I graduated, that's something that I kind of kept at it, right? I made sure I was learning in my free time all the tools that I potentially need. And when I moved to Canada, those came in really handy because those skills were in demand at that time. It had at that point, reached that level where it was more common. And then I started, and then when the pandemic hit, it was really, and my previous team was impacted. It was just a matter of communicating how I actually applied those skills at work.
Thank you, Bilal.
So I can maybe add a little bit, or Sarah, do you want to go for it, Sarah?
All right, sure, I'll jump in. So just in talking about pursuing my current role, I guess I wouldn't even necessarily call it a role because it's kind of something completely out of the box that I've created myself from a million different places. But back when I was in college, as I stated in my introduction, I was really all over the place. And I just had so many different ideas and I didn't really know like where I would fit in. Nothing was quite feeling right. So at the time, I just decided to like kind of get my hands in as many different things as I could work-wise. Like I tried, digital media stuff, I tried advertising stuff. And the more and more that I tried different things, I started picking up like small projects through my connections, which eventually turned into more client work, which I could do remotely. So since I already had a love for travel, then I decided that I would hit the road after graduation and basically just bring my laptop and see what would happen, which I will elaborate more on as we go on. But in regards to how my experiences at the U prepared me for this, I think one of the most crucial things was that I really did get to try a lot of different things when I was in college. And that included learning what I really did like and also what I didn't like. So I think being at peace with that, like knowing that you're not going to love every single thing that you're doing in college, and kind of being able to test different things was like super, super valuable. And I feel like with all that the U has to offer, I did get to do that. So I'm grateful for that.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Alan?
Yeah, I was just going to say a couple of things. Of all of us here, I think I have the most distance from when I graduated from the U until now. So I'm really drawing from my memories from way back when. But I can say since I graduated, I've searched for and found 2 different roles abroad while I was living in the US. The first one was deeply connected to the University of Minnesota because it was recent. I'd studied at the U and really focused in on international management. And at that time, there were a lot of great resources and really great courses and professors that helped to prepare me for an international career at the time. And it also led me to my first position, which was in Madrid, which I was able to find that through networking and finding positions, thanks to being at the University of Minnesota. And then my second role, which was a number of years later, I realized that, hey, I was getting kind of bored living back in the US and I wanted another challenge. So I deliberately searched for a position in Paris, really focused in on my search to 3 things that made me unique as a candidate. And 6 jobs showed up in my search, and I was able to get one of those 6. And of course, my experience and connections and everything that I learned at the University of Minnesota helped with that second opportunity as well. But I guess my main feeling was that when I was a student and even after that, after graduating, there are no shortages of resources and opportunities. It's more a question of focusing and finding what it is that you want and then just making it happen. And so that's kind of the way that I look at it. A lot of other places where you can study, I don't know if you have that many opportunities to do anything that you want. And I really feel that at the University of Minnesota, it's such a large and great place that you can find pretty much anything you want to do and just have to make it happen.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, that is so true. Having also attended the University of Minnesota, there's just no end to the options for experiences and extracurriculars and connections that you can make. Our next question is, how did each of your unique paths lead to working in another country? And I know some of you already really addressed that. So if you want to add anything to that question, go ahead.
I'm happy to start off. So I kind of talked about it a little bit already, but basically I graduated back in 2018. I did not have a full-time offer. I did not have a plan. I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but I did have a short-term internship that was 2 months. So I had a little bit of time to work with before I had to like figure it out. And while I was doing that, I was also working on my own freelance portfolio. So I was trying to build clients, build my experience, put everything online and market myself for the skills that I had at the time. So when push came to shove and my 2-month internship was over, I basically had a choice. I could either stay in the US and, maybe work at something, whatever I could pick up at the time. Or I thought I could take my laptop, go somewhere where I knew would be cheaper to live while I continued building what I was working so hard on during my senior year of college. So I left the US in September of 2018 with about only a couple $1,000s of savings at the time, and maybe like $500 or $600 worth of projects booked. So I really didn't have any stability at all. It was a huge gamble. And I went to Vietnam, where I was living off of next to nothing, just trying to make ends meet and build what I was working on. And I kind of went on like that for a good 6 months, and it kept growing and building. And by the 6-month mark, I had gotten enough retainer clients to the point where I was working full time. And it just continued on like that, where I kept on pitching publications to write for different places to get my words placed. And I never went back to the US. So other than like a visit. And yeah, it was just to me, like the craziest dream come true that I still am like, wow, I can't believe I'm here. So yeah, pretty roundabout story, but that's how I'm here now.
Thank you for sharing, Sarah. That's really inspiring.
It was a little different for me, I think, because when my family became permanent residents in Canada, I was already working in the States. So I kind of had a choice to either work towards becoming a naturalized citizen or move to a new country and be closer to the family. So I actually had a bunch of sleepless nights just trying to figure out what the best thing was. So in in typical me fashion, I put together a decision tree and put down probabilities and all like the financial, personal, career, and social side of things. Try to see what the move would end up being and I even spoke with a bunch of second degree connections on LinkedIn and first degree connections on LinkedIn who were living in Canada at that time. Especially how how life was actually different, because it seems very similar to be in Canada and the US, but there are subtle differences in the culture and in the environment in general, and in the legal and kind of the overall space as well. But I even spoke with some alumni who had moved here and got their perspective. And then when I visited Toronto, I kind of knew that this was definitely the place to be. I enjoyed the fact that there's a huge body of water here. It's one of the big lakes here. The weather is about the same, so I really can't, I'm not really getting any better or worse. And I guess, yeah, even at the end of it, I just decided, I saved up whatever I could in a year, quit my previous role, and then moved here without a job. So I had a whole summer to myself, losing weight and applying for jobs, learning new skills, and then I eventually found something at the end of summer.
Yeah, I can also add a little bit more piece regarding how I identify my pathway to move to Netherlands, because Netherlands definitely is one of my options. So for me, during the time is I know I want to move to a country, then looking for a job rather than secure a job first. Similar as Sarah's, I just want to jump for new adventures. So I try to look in something. So either something more affordable. So a certain element I'm looking to is local culture. What's their current immigration policy? How is my identity gonna fix in that kind of cultures? What is the lifestyle looks like in that destination country? What's the social benefit with that destination country, specifically if I don't have a job? So I think I compare with the multiple countries, the Netherlands just become one of the countries for me as an international student in the US. That's one of the destination for me is most easy to access by the immigration policy. But for US citizens, when I did all my searching, there's a few other countries also easy for people moving to. For example, there's 5 countries. If you're a US citizen under age of 30, you can move there pretty much freely to working there. It's like Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, South Korea, and Iceland. But some countries do have limited time for you to go there. For example, Singapore require you to go there within 12 months post your graduation. And some other countries may have a different time when you can apply. So I think in terms of looking for the pathway move to a new country, definitely looking to immigration policy, go to the government website. That helped me a lot. The other thing, social benefits are very important for me, specifically if I don't have a job first. I want to make sure my health insurance is covered. So when I move to Netherlands, I know the government will cover my health insurance for unless, if I did not make enough money, the government will pay for my health insurance. So this basic need really solved. So I'm be able to make the jump feel more confident to do it. So that's my thoughts on that.
Thank you, Tim. All right, well, we can move on to the next question. What are the strategies that you discovered to prepare for the cost of living in a new country?
I think it's going to be different for everyone generally, but for me, I had a few tools I came across online. I think it was World Data and Numbeo. And I think they have different audiences. You can just put into cities and it tells you how much it costs, but that really doesn't do it any justice. It can change at any given point. Different parts of the city are different. Anyone who's moving is probably gonna, either be going with their kids or going by themselves. So they'll have a different different timeline to prepare for. I think you need definitely some kind of a budget. You need to plan for what happens if you don't get a job in 3 or 6 months. If I mean, in my case, it's like I had nothing set in stone when I had moved. I tried to minimize it. So I actually tried to move between Airbnbs when I first moved here, just so, I mean, it was an opportunity to get to know different parts of the city, but also it was significantly cheaper and more flexible. I could move at the end of the month if I didn't like the place, or if I didn't like the neighborhood, for example. You probably definitely want to project the cost out if you, um, at least for a few months until the social benefits kick in, or until if what's likely to get a job in your field.
That's a great idea, Airbnb, and experience lots of different neighborhoods before you commit to something. I like that. Anyone else want to jump in on this question?
Yeah, I guess it also depends on what your goal is. So if you really know you want to move to a country and you just want to pick up and do it, then go for it. Then you need to follow the advice that Bilal just gave. Like, make sure you plan, you prepare, you save. Things are going to be more expensive probably than you expect. Hopefully not. The other strategy is to actually try to find companies or roles in the country that you're at that would sponsor you or move you there. I mean, that's the best of both worlds. Or even look for local companies that are pretty large, that have offices in the country that you're interested in. There are plenty of, especially even in Minnesota, there are so many great companies that have a presence in other countries that are looking for individuals to move there. And in a lot of cases, the best advice that I could give is that if you really want to do it and it's a part of your career goals, then you might have to make concessions on things like salary, or what you're paid in the local currency, or in the local economy, or whatever the conditions are. You need to adjust and recalibrate your expectations. It could go up, it could go down. So don't expect, hey, this is what my market value is here, this is what I expect there. Make sure that you are comparing yourself. In some cases, you can even end up getting an increase. So it's just kind of my spontaneous feelings about that.
Yeah, I actually agree with one thing. If you can get a role before moving, that is ideal. I mean, that's what I was kind of going for. Before I moved, I tried a job hunt for about 6 or 8 months, spoke with people here, and it was like, there's so many people who are looking for a job in Toronto. They have no reason at that point to consider anyone living abroad. And eventually, I mean, it did work out, so I really can't complain. But yeah, if that's an option at all, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, I also can add a little bit more. I think if you secure a job before you move, that definitely is the best solution and situation. You can make sure you are more like comfortable in terms of, your financial gonna be stable. And also for certain countries, they even have more tax benefit for company to hire people from overseas. So for example, in Netherlands, the company who hire people from overseas, you are qualified for 30% ruling. So which means in the first 5 years, if company hire you from overseas, 30% of your tax is non-taxable. So, that's another thing to take consideration in terms of your tax regulation, which we can also talk a little bit more later.
Yeah, there's just one thing that I'll add to this question. The biggest thing for me when I was getting started was minimalism. Like, I got rid of so many things. You really have to analyze, like, is this item here like giving me value, or can I just get rid of it? Because like the less stuff that you have, the more agile you are. And then, for example, if you want to like move Airbnbs from one side of the city to the other, you're going to spend less money because you're not going to have to move all that stuff. So that was my biggest thing. Like, I was going into countries that were not even cheap because I was like, oh, I love Paris, so I would show up and be like, oh wait, I can't afford this, when I was new. And so that was my big thing. Like, how much can I get rid of? How little can I live off of, like, when I'm somewhere new, to make sure that I'm going to be secure? So yeah, I did a lot of financial gymnastics when I was getting started, but like, you learn your footing after a while, and it becomes like kind of a second nature when you go somewhere new.
Yeah, I feel like that's going to be everyone's story, where you have to. I mean, if you lived anywhere for like more than a year or so, you probably have more than 2 suitcases worth of stuff, and at some point you figure out what to do with it all. Even moving places here, but when I was moving, it was just I had like 4 years worth of stuff that I had to do something with. The furniture was obviously sold, but then you have all the little things, all the textbooks, for example, that I actually still refer to. I had to figure out how to transport those over once I actually have something solidified. So I completely agree where you need to be, you need to know what to do with everything that surrounds you pretty much.
Yeah, it is. That's different. You know, if you're trying to, I have a storage unit back in Minneapolis and I have a backpack here. So it is definitely depending on like how much stuff you have to bring. And then I guess my philosophy has been, I can buy things here, but you know, I could see a scenario absolutely where I would be like, oh my God, I have like 4 suitcases. So yeah, it just depends where you're going for sure.
Maybe a fun thing to add to that, Sarah, given that you mentioned Paris, it's also wherever you end up, try not to go to the tourist places because you're going to pay a lot more. And if you read the guidebooks, you read the places. After a couple of years in Paris, I realized, wow, I was eating at restaurants that were far too more expensive and the quality wasn't nearly as good as it should have been for what I was paying. But you don't realize that until you're there for a while. So try to avoid the tourist traps too.
And yeah, I mean, if you're actually moving, it's like your budget has a ceiling. You cannot go above it. So that doesn't shift. Doesn't matter if the dining priorities or I mean any other thing really, any other cost. Things move around, but for sure, in the beginning, I learned that some of the things that I was experiencing is like I don't need to see this. I'll probably see this 10 years down the line if I really have to.
Great, thank you all. Sarah, I love that minimalist idea. I need you to come to my house and like help us get rid of things.
Got you. I wrote articles on it. I'll share them.
Thank you. Yes, I appreciate that. I think that a lot of people are trying to work on their material goods reduction right now. And I'll add that, yeah, I've known people who have had the goal of moving abroad, and so they've made it a goal to pay down their student debt if they have student debt, so that they can be more free to take a position in a country that maybe doesn't have the same pay amounts as the US, or that would support their student loan payments. So they work really hard at a job, you know, to get their student debt down so that they can go and be free and take something that maybe pays a little less than they would like, but it just allows them that flexibility. So, all right, well, our next question is, as not everyone around the globe is familiar with Minnesota or the University of Minnesota, how have you communicated the value of your UMN experience while outside the US?
I think it's more about the skills as well. First, so I mean, the benefits of actually going to Minnesota and something that I've seen, at least here in Canada, is and in other countries as well when I was traveling. But there's usually alumni in some that are either from or living in any of the countries that you're going to go to. So it definitely helps to get their perspective and you know kind of relate on that note. But also the education itself provides a global perspective. There are courses you need to do on how the world works, and that really helped in being able to you know have a more empathetic view of the world generally when speaking with people. I thought the skills that I learned were really helpful. I kind of focused more on those. You know, you're connecting with professionals in the field. You're trying to figure out how things are working. You can, and a lot of the times, what ended up happening is something that I did in college would end up, you know, would end up being something really cool that they could relate to. Some of the projects that I did in class, I've been able to recreate over time, actually doing better than I did in school on those projects. And I think you're talking about those and just generally, I think it's good perspective to it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a lot of it's more like skill set we learn from our UFM experience. And I think not only things we learned from classroom, but a lot is from our different kind of extracurricular events we joined, like for student development. So I'm actually right now working with one of my interns. This individual intern is European based, so doing a master program currently. So when I try to compare my experience with her experience in the university, I feel like their education setting is really just go to classroom, that's it. So there's no development in terms of how to work professionally. So I think I learned all my how to working professional from my UFM experience through this kind of extracurricular. So I definitely think that's one of the elements, definitely highlight my UFM value. The other thing is just like other people mentioned previously. It's a global perspective. So I had the opportunity to study abroad in Greece during my senior year. So that experience really helped me to learn more about Europe, learn more about the culture outside the US or China. So I think the study abroad also another very good value for my U of M experience.
I'll jump in here. For me, it's really about the people and the community that I had back at the U that continues to be a community, right now. I'm 24 now, and I still am in contact with so many people from the U, whether they're current students, professors, mentors, people that I've worked with, some of my best friends in the entire world, and that's something that I communicate a lot, is how valuable the connections and the lifelong relationships that I made from going to school at the U really gave me, So not only has that benefited me professionally, but it's just been my entire world, Like I feel like I have a little U of M family like rooting for me, like wherever I go in the world. I have, sometimes I'll just get a random email from somebody who's like, hey, reconnecting, something like that. I'm just like, this is for the heart. So yeah, it comes down to the people and the soul of the U for me.
Actually, one more thing to add to that. The career service, so if you're already at the U, the career services are fantastic. Those are skills not necessarily for you, but I think those are life skills in general. Staying connected with those folks who work in UMN career services and your specific college's career services, that is amazing. And even if you're an alumni, I think it's something that you can easily do after graduating as well. So I'd recommend that. I think those skills have really helped here as well.
Alan, did you want to add anything, or we can move on to the next question as well?
Just quickly for me, just to echo what everybody's saying about networking and staying connected, just being very proactive and like, for instance, when I was in Paris, Paris is a very big city, a very international city, and making sure that I connect with, there was a local organization that was an American alumni network or club, where a bunch of universities from Paris would get together so everybody would connect. I just made it a point to really reach out and seek and find University of Minnesota alumni that we can connect and do activities together and network as well. So just network and stay connected.
All right. That speaks to our next question. If anyone would like to add anything, how have you successfully networked while living in a new country? What are the strategies that you've used to meet others, both friends and professionals?
I think for me, one thing different LinkedIn, I go to LinkedIn, find the University of Minnesota, then search the geolocation based in the Netherlands area. So I definitely connect with a lot of people prior my move to the Netherlands. So once I got here, I set up a coffee meeting with them, just kind of chat about my experience. So fun fact, I actually work with one of U of M alumni here. She actually helped my copy. She's a copywriter, and she helped me write my website and a lot of contents. So this is all from network. So I think that's different. One part going to the networks through alumni group. The other thing network for me is moving to a new country. Fitness is very important for me. So I go to gym, I do a different class. I met people through this gym class. So that's another way I met people. Of course, there are so many different kind of social apps you can use. You can use Meetup to meet people by your interests. So that's kind of like my 3 tips for people who want to move to a new country to network with other professionals or alum.
Yeah, those are excellent. I think I was going to say those exact things. And I think the one thing that anyone can do to accelerate the networking abroad is to actually make an effort to go outside. If you are job hunting, try to do it from a cafe. If the budget doesn't allow that, you can go to the library or the local university. And then I think what Tim said about activity, for sure, if you have a favorite sport, team sport you can get involved in, that's great. But even if it's not a team sport, just joining any kind of joining a sport at any level will introduce to people who are doing really cool things as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what has been said already. Personally, I've always been a little bit of a more unconventional networker. I've made a lot of friends and connections in airports and bus stops and all the random places around the world. But another thing I will add that's a bit more structured, when you're an expat, there are so many resources available to you, such as Facebook groups, even like entire platforms that are dedicated to, expats or digital nomads, if you'll call them. So that has been a really, really good resource for me, like different Facebook groups, online communities, stuff like that. Yeah, those have been super helpful for me in both professional and just for making friends abroad.
Okay, great. So our next question, which resources would you recommend to audience members exploring career opportunities where you are living? And what should people know about living and working in your location?
I can kick us off. Yeah. Sorry, so was someone else going to go first? Okay. Yeah. For Toronto, I think the industry has really been booming in terms of tech, finance, and the arts. Um, the one thing to know, there's some benefit in knowing that there's some similar sports with the U.S. and the environment is generally the same. It is fairly expensive to live in, considering the social system is really well built out. But at the end of the day, I think the transition is going to be very different for the level at which you're moving. So if you're, for example, a graduate, like pretty much I was at that time, it'll be very different than if you were already working and you have a few, like maybe 10 plus years of experience. It'll be very different. Those industries are generally booming. I think you'd be best off speaking with some of the alumni that are already here in the different industries. Obviously, if you ever get a chance to travel to Toronto, you can absolutely message me and we can we can talk more about the city here as well.
Thanks for sharing. I think maybe not only for Netherlands, but I think this one it probably apply for most countries. Is if you're currently working at a multinational company, the one thing you can ask for your employers to see if you can transfer to a different location, different country. Either you can do a short-term assignment or you can do a long-term permanently to move to a different country. So that's one thing you can look into with your current employer is they do have certain office overseas. That might be an option for you. The other thing I think, if you want to looking for a new job in the destination country, is really to check their immigration policy and eligibility. Are you able to get a working visa there, and how hard to get a working visa there? Do you have a dual citizenship for that destination country to allow you to enter their market for job market freely? I think when you do all this research, there's a certain element you should look into it. It's one thing about industry. What is the biggest industry in that destination country? With your skill set, are you able to secure a job? And what's their unemployment rates there? What's the destination country's language? Do they have multinational companies speak English as their primarily working language? So that's the thing you need to take into consideration. For example, if you're moving to Middle East, for certain country in the Middle East, if you don't speak English, are you able to live in there? So that's the things you should also think about that part. Looking at unemployment rate, specifically right now during COVID-19 period. So if you want to move now, I think the best thing to do is looking at that country's unemployment rate to see, are they able to have enough jobs to follow their current national in that country? Because I think every single country, they try to follow this gap for their local citizens first before they open up for the foreign national. So I think that's my tips for moving to a destination country. And for Netherlands, currently, I think the biggest industry here is commercial services. So Shell, Philips, this is all like a Dutch company. They are still hiring people. Other commercial company, for example, like Booking.com is based in the Netherlands. Our second biggest industry is the healthcare. So right now also it's booming. So people can Google a little bit more on what industry in that country.
So I know for my experience in Spain, anybody that's listening, if you're European, you can work in Spain, no problem. anybody that's listening, if you have a lot of disposable income sitting around and you can afford to buy a house, there's a certain threshold where if you buy a house, you get work permit as well. Other than that, all the things that Tim just described, I would say the same applies to France, where I lived for many years, as it would be to Spain. There are a lot of great companies that are local, that are looking for talent. And in most cases, if you have a unique skill that the employer cannot find locally, they are allowed to hire outside of their country. But they technically have to find somebody locally first and then prove they were not able to find that candidate. And then they can go to external locals to hire for that role. So that would be something to look at. If you have a really unique skill that also, for instance, if you speak English and it's required that they need somebody that speaks English, and you have a specific skill, that could make you more attractive than others that might not have that skill and the ability to speak English. Just an example.
Great. Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, I feel like everybody answered that super duper well already. What I will add, because I think that my situation is different from everybody else, my clients are actually based in the US and the UK, and I'm writing for publications all over the world. So depending on like, if you're looking for that type of employment where you want to have like clients and they might be based in your home country, that's different because I'm actually still paying US taxes. So then you have to go in, like I have a consultant for it because it honestly gets very confusing and there's a lot of like tax laws and international things like that that you really want to make sure that you're well versed on. So it really just depends on where you decide to settle down if you are looking to pursue the same type of work that I'm doing. But it's really important to hire somebody who's super well versed in it because they can get very complex and very confusing. So be sure to talk to a professional.
That's a great insight. Thanks for sharing, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our next question is, recently we've seen a vast increase in the number of people whose work is no longer tied to a physical location. As someone who is working internationally, what is your perspective on working remotely? Do any of you have recommendations for someone who is considering making the leap to remote work outside the United States?
I can jump in there with a thought that connects into what you're saying. I think now is a great opportunity to find a position that could eventually lead to an international role. There are a lot of companies that are looking to fill roles, but they realize that they can't bring them to where they are because of the environment that we're in now. So they're willing to hire in other countries with the intention of bringing them to their headquarters in a year and sometimes 2 years. So first thing I can say is it's a great time to be looking for opportunities like that. The second thing you asked about taking a remote, and I think Sarah can talk to this better than I can, but taking the leap and working remotely from a new country. I'd say if you really want to do it, go for it. It's not me that's risking that, so it's easy for me to say that. But if you really want to make something happen, just try it, take a risk. And I think it's all of us on this, this panel today, we've taken risks and we felt that it was worth it. And we really enjoyed what came after the risk. So my message would be, if you really want to make it happen, take a risk and go for it.
Definitely agree with you, Alan. I think you need to take the risk. And I agree with you. Right now, it's a perfect opportunity for people looking for something remotely. I really love the idea of working remote. I think my only suggestion is, my only thing is, like advice is people really looking at your US tax. If you are a US citizen, doesn't matter where you're moving to, you need to pay US tax. And file US tax overseas is pretty complicated. You need to submit a multiple document. I think a lot of people probably experience here. I think the other part is working remotely is you, like Sarah, have so many freelance jobs, which I'm based in Netherlands. So of course, I want to promote a little bit more about Dutch freelance work and market from immigration perspective. There is actually a self-employment visa available in Netherlands for people to move here to freelance work. And this visa actually have a Dutch-American treat. So which means every single American citizen can move to Netherlands with 4,000 euro. You can set up your own freelance company here. You are qualified to stay here as a long-term resident in Netherlands. So that might be a very good option for people who want to consider moving abroad and working remotely for EU clients. Just one of the suggestions here. People can Google it to search a little bit more.
Yep, and as I said, I was working remotely before the pandemic started, and what I've seen happen during this past year is that I've I'm I've seen that most companies have at least considered what jobs really need to be done in office versus remotely. If I mean, I guess the way to find that out is if during the pandemic you had to figure out how to go into the lab or go into office to actually get work done. Those are kind of jobs you might not, that those might not be able to be done remotely. But everything else, um, I think 80+% of those jobs at this point, knowledge-based jobs, can be done from any location. There would obviously, be a risk when you're considering taking a remote job, and it perfectly makes sense. What Alan said, that if you think it's worth it, it's worth taking a risk. If there's anything that's kind of pushing you to do it, go for it. But just try to see if it can be a more calculated risk, because you have to consider the legal, financial, and logistical implications. So one of the things I found out in Costa Rica was I was not going to have very access to internet very easily unless I planned that out ahead of time. So I wanted to make sure I was at home, during working hours, for example. Would the time zone difference make it difficult for you to work and actually enjoy or live a normal life over there? What would the tax implications be? And yeah, if you're working at a company that can move you remotely, that is, or move you to a different country for a remote job, that's perfect.
Yeah, I really like what everybody has said already. And as far as my perspective on remote work, I do see it as the way of the future. And I think that a lot of people are kind of waking up to it as well. One big thing about it that I've been learning a lot over the past 2 years is that communication is always tricky. Even in person, we're constantly reading body language, things like that. And when you put it online, it's a whole other level. So I think making sure that you're communicating effectively with, whether that's with one client or a team or another individual, that's like been a really big part of it for me, is learning how I can best communicate with my clients, whether that's through email, Slack, video call, everything like that, to make sure that your own needs are met and also your clients' needs are met. So yeah, that's been a really big thing for me. But as far as taking the leap, like, I just think if you have the slightest feeling and that it's something that you want to do and you want to see the world, like, there's just no other answer. Like, you can either not do it and just wait and see what happens, or you could just go and try it, and if it works, it works, and then that's great, right? But if it doesn't, then you just pick up and try again. So I completely agree with what everybody has said already. It's definitely an incredibly enriching experience. So, one way or the other, you'll make it work.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, we have a question. It is, are you fluent in the language of the country in which you're living? And how much of the language do you recommend learning before moving to a new city, new country?
I can start with that one. So before I was in Indonesia, I was hopping around. Well, I lived in Australia for a little bit, so that's English, and that's didn't have to learn anything. So before that, I was in South American countries for about 6 months, and I do feel like a moral, ethical obligation to learn the language of where I am. So when I was in South America, it was pretty informal. I was just practicing on my own because back then my budget was more limited. But now I'm taking private lessons here to learn Indonesian, and it's slow, but I'm getting better. So that is one thing that I feel strongly about, and an expectation I put on myself. But everybody's different, so.
So I have two experiences to share. One, when I moved to Spain the first time, I did speak and I learned it pretty quickly. I became much better at living there. So it helped to have a foundation, which thanks to the University of Minnesota, I studied a lot of Spanish, and then it helped me when I moved there. And then I became fluent within a few months. So that was kind of an interesting experience. Then when I moved to France, I studied as much as I could, but it really took me quite a while to pick up French. But to answer the question, I think that you need to be comfortable with not being perfect, but be focused on trying to learn the local. I think it's important to learn the local language. And now I live in Catalonia. I don't speak Catalan. I do speak Spanish, so I'm doing my best and learning the Catalan is actually the first language for many here. So I'm picking up as much as possible. That's answers the question, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you all. Like learning local language is very important. So for me, moved to Netherlands, of course, I don't speak Dutch. But one part of the reason I moved to here, because I know Netherlands is the #1 country with English proficiency with non-English speaking land. So when I got here, I don't have any issue to talk to people because everyone speaks English here. But that also caused the issue is because once people know I speak English, they refuse to talk to me in Dutch. So it's very hard for me to learn the local language.
I think I could add a little bit, maybe Sarah, for what you're saying, and Tim as well. If you make an effort and you show that you're trying, it really gets you a long way. So especially they say that a lot in Paris, if you at least try to speak French, and if you don't speak any French, if you at least try, people really will be more open to helping you and being supportive. So at a minimum, just try. But at least, I would say make an effort and commit to trying to learn the language as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree to that. A little bit will go a long way, so it's helpful.
Right. Well, we have time for, I think, just one more question. So someone asked, thinking back on your undergrad, were there specific skills or knowledge that you wish you knew before making or taking the step to move abroad? For example, more volunteering, research jobs, alumni networking, learning about finance, etc.
Yeah, I think alumni networking is the big one here. At least, in order to get your bearings when you land, for example. And personal finance is definitely something that there's side courses on. I think those are things that I wish I'd known even longer. I don't think anyone who would say they wish they didn't know personal finance. So yeah, those are definitely skills I think were really helpful when I learned them.
I'll take one from here. I'm going to get like a little bit deeper and say confidence, because actually it's something that I didn't really possess for most of my undergraduate career. I never really thought that I could be here. So I had to go through a lot of different iterations of figuring out things that I did not fit into to ultimately get me to where I am today, when I wish that I had just realized sooner, like, hey, maybe I should just go and try this. So I would say instead of like beating around the bush, I just go for it, that's like, yeah, it's just something like you're so much more capable of doing things than you think you are. And so instead of like that kind of, yeah, I don't know, a bit roundabout, but that's how I feel about it.
And I would just add presentation skills. Like you can always improve as a presenter, in public speaking in particular. Just keep on refining that skill and don't ever let it get soft. Sharpen it as much as you can.
That's a great one, Alan. That'll never disserve you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, did anyone else want to add any last thoughts before we wrap it up? Okay. Well, thank you all for being here. I just have a couple items to mention before we close out our time today. So for all of the audience members listening, we would love your feedback. So please provide us your thoughts in the survey that you'll be receiving in the next couple of days. You'll also be receiving a link to the recording in case you want to watch it again or share it with any friends. And then finally, we encourage you to join the University of Minnesota Alumni Association's Maroon and Gold Network. So you can continue making connections in your industry or your profession of interest on our Maroon and Gold Network with other alumni. And I'll send a link to join that as well in our follow-up communication. So thank you again to our panelists for your time and your wonderful insights. We really enjoyed having you with us today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.